Welcome to the Manifestation and Money Podcast, Whitney.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Jen. This is going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. This is going to be a great conversation. I'd love for you to share with the listeners who you are and what your story is.
Well, so my name is Whitney Elkins-Hutten. What I do is I'm the director of investor education at passiveinvesting.com. I also coach individual investors at Ash Wealth. But that's not how I started out. I didn't come into the world with the intention of being a financial coach or teaching investors how to turn their active income into passive income and long-term wealth. I actually started off education-wise in public health. And anyways, I bought a house in 2002 with a significant other, and that was kind of my first foray into real estate. The relationship quickly fell apart, and I had the house, and I thought it was going to break me. So I stuffed it full of roommates, completed the rehab on the property, and then I sold it within 11 months. And mind you, I had actually kind of started reading the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I was like, okay, I understand that you can make money in real estate, but I just didn't know how. I skimmed the last 10 chapters. Sold that property, and then they handed over a check to me for $52,000. And when I was putting together my taxes, and that's US dollars. And when I was putting together my taxes, I realized I had actually not been paying for any of the expenses on the property. And matter of fact, I'd been making money. And the light bulb went off in my head. Like, hey, there might be something here, because here I was able to make almost as much money as I did at my day job that had me in public health, that had me working 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes and traveling a ton and not able to see my family, an alien father. And so that's really what jump-started me on this journey towards financial independence, financial freedom, but really like to understand how money works and how you can build wealth and true passive income that helps pay the bills on a monthly basis alongside what you're doing for your day job.
Yeah, and I like that alongside, because so many people are like, the 9 to 5 grind. How can I get out of this? But if you like your job and you still want to build wealth, how does money work? Is that what you said? People learn how money works. So in a nutshell, how does money work?
I think a lot of us, that go into a job, we go to school. And first of all, it's understanding the narrative and what the objective of money is, right? Money is it's a tool to help you get your 5 freedoms in life, like time freedom, choice freedom, location freedom, freedom to create an impact. But in order to get those other 4 freedoms, you kind of have to have some sort of financial freedom. And when we are working our day job, unless you're in a high-powered sales position, earning like commissions, your income is probably attached to some sort of trade for time. And that's really when the light bulb went off for me. And when I did that house and I sold it, I'm like, holy smokes. Okay, I was able to work nights and weekends. I was able to pay my friends in beer, sushi, and pizza. And I made almost 6 figures between like the equity that I got at the sale of the property, the cash flow that I was getting on a monthly basis because I was bringing in more money than I was paying out. And then I also got a tax break in the United States for primary residences. If you meet certain guidelines, you can actually get the first $500,000 as a married couple tax-free on a capital gain when you sell your primary residence. And I was like, I didn't have to go to school for that. I could do this on nights and weekends. And that's really where the just light bulbs just started popping all over the place. I'm like, there is a path for me where I don't have to trade all my time, 40 hours a week in a cubicle or traveling in order to, and saving, scrimping and saving to fund a life later. I can actually figure out how to fund that life in the future, but also maybe do it now to where I can actually have more choice and time freedom. So I know that wasn't like a direct, hey, this is how money works. Let's break out some graphs on the screen or anything like that. But it was really that pivotal point in understanding, wait, the narrative that I had been told and how I've been raised isn't actually true. There is a new paradigm here that I can step into.
Yes, to not have to trade your time for dollars. Once people make that shift, first of all, that light bulb moment is just, the potential there, but then the power and the freedom, and for me, excitement in, okay, now let's explore what those options look like. So for you, do you consider real estate passive investing?
Ugh.
Because I know there's a,
Yeah, it can be.
okay.
It can definitely be passive investing. And like mind you, during this whole time, we took 24 years of my financial journey and smashed it down into a 2-minute soundbite, right? So there's a lot of other things that I've done here, like scaling a single family rental portfolio, doing general partnerships on larger multifamily buildings, private equity raising, right? That was the pivotal moment that got me going. Now, I actually was very active in my time involvement to get that house repositioned. But the thing was that I started creating leverage. Instead of getting paid 25, 50, $75 an hour, by the time I broke it down, I was getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour. And as I continued to figure out how to build leverage into my portfolio, I'm to the point now where I invest in other people's deals. I get paid thousands of dollars an hour because I'm no longer doing the work.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, when they look at real estate and they ask if it's passive, you might need to start off in a very active manner where you are spending your nights and weekends in order to build up the capital in order to kind of get that snowball going. But at some point in time, you can start pivoting, either bringing more people into your real estate company, business, and stepping yourself out of it, or investing in other people's deals. Either way, that becomes largely passive. If you've ever read the book Cashflow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, think of it when you first get your first real estate rental, or maybe even your first 10 or 20, a lot of people try to self manage them. You're in the self employed category, right? You're getting tax breaks, but you're in solidly in the self-employed category. We need to figure out how to scale you, how you use your time into the business category or pivot your whole portfolio from the active real estate investing into actually investing in other people's deals. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's basically what you have time and attention for. I just
Mhm.
actually spoke at a conference last week with a 50 female physicians in the room, and I asked who invested actively and who invested passively. And these physicians, half of these women were trying to figure out how to scale their own active portfolio and manage it. I'm like, why? You have such a better, higher and better use of your time and attention focused on building capital in your day job, in your practice. Let's get you pivoted into a different part of the portfolio passive. Now, the reason why I kind of went is real estate passive, and I said kind of, is because we also have to think about how it's taxed. And so when we say passive, a lot of people are we talking about your time or are we talking about the taxation of the money? So you can actually be very active in your portfolio, but be taxed passively. And I always want to bring the context back to time, right? Because we have a choice on how we organize our affairs for taxation purposes. We all have the same 24 hours in the day.
Yeah, that's so true. And what you do with them, or what you tell your money to do with them too, I guess is part of it, right? For you to be passively saying, my dollars are going to go do these jobs for me, freeing Whitney up to go use her brain or the leverage, those tools that you got your schooling through being that active investor at first. So now I'm sure if you have passive investors that come on with you, you are sharing your knowledge with them. So they don't have to go get that hard knocks, hands-on experience. You can say, okay, here's what I've learned. If you've got the capital to go out, these are the kind of investments you should be doing.
Yeah, so, at passiveinvesting.com, we largely work with accredited investors. We actually do have a Regulation A fund in the works, meaning we can work with sophisticated investors here, rolling out momentarily. But long story short, most of the people that I work with, they have a higher and better use of their time. They're business owners or they're trying to figure out how to scale their own business. One person I can think of, they're scaling a mortuary company. And I'm like, that's a nights and weekend job, right? That's a business. There is no rhythm to that business for sure.
Mhm.
The last thing that you need is trying to figure out how to manage a active real estate portfolio where your tenants are calling you. And I was like, you already got people calling you at night and on the weekends. If that is your passion, the mortuary business, let's keep you there and figure out then how do we leverage into real estate. And
Mhm.
here's the thing, you don't have to have the beauty of investing in real estate, or at least this is what I discovered. I'm like, I didn't have to go to school to figure out how
Mhm.
to invest in real estate. There was no degree for me to buy my first property, which was the roof over my head. Once I had that skill, I could translate that into buying rentals. Once I had multiple rentals, I could translate that into buying single family property or multifamily property. I can skip over all of that and like just learn how to invest. There's no degree needed.
Mhm.
But like you said, there is education, and we provide a lot of that free for our investors.
My basic research on what is happening in the world and the high inflation that we're going through right now, the people who are working at their job without doing any kind of passive or active investing on the outsides, you're falling behind because they're raising the cost of goods so fast that your paycheck isn't keeping up with it. And one of the best ways to leverage your money is to buy cash flowing assets like real estate or create a business where your fees and your services, the things you're charging for, are moving in tandem with the inflationary rates, right? So, what are some good starter passive investing ideas that you have for people?
Yeah, so I really want to encourage people to like think in tiers. I cover a whole strategy on how to organize your portfolio and fortify your initial investing career in my book Money for Tomorrow. But let's give a framework that everybody can operate from right now. The first part of investing is actually making sure that you have reserves in place. So that is a part of investing. A lot of people will look at those reserves sitting in the bank. They're like, it's losing money. Why would I do that? And I'm like, when you invest into real estate, whether it's your own real estate that you control or a passive deal, there's usually an element of illiquidity to it. You can't get it back for a time period. So you need to have a pile of cash set aside. Maybe that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months of reserves, right? I always encourage people think in terms of if you lost your job, how long would it take for you to replace your income with another job? Okay, at least start there. And then think in terms of what would allow you to sleep well at night. Okay, so for me, I could probably find a job pretty readily with my skill set. But what allows me to sleep well at night is having 6 to 9 months of reserves in the bank. So that's where I land. Everybody is a little bit different. That allows us then, whatever capital we build past that, now we need to think in terms of like two different things. Do we need equity growth or do we need cash flow? Now, most people starting off are going to tip towards the equity growth, but that's high risk, high reward. But everybody needs cash flow. And we shouldn't go into any one investment expecting it to provide equity and cash flow for us. Okay, that is what I got a lot of investors here in the United States in trouble between 2021 and 2023. They went into value add multifamily deals that in theory would cash flow and provide equity growth. Well, it just took a couple of taxes being raised, insurance going up, and then also interest rates going up. That was a perfect storm. The cash flow evaporated, and then sometimes the equity also got evaporated too in those deals. So this is where I encourage people, tier one, reserves. Tier two, think about going into cash flowing deals like debt deals, things that are safe, predictable. Maybe you earn an interest rate double of what inflation is. That's great. And a lot of people will check me on this and they're like, Whitney, but there's no equity growth there. And I'm like, only if you're consuming the cash flow. If we take in the cash flow and we continue to compound it in and allow time work for us, we are getting equity growth. And then once we have enough cash flow coming in to maybe replace some basic expenses, now we get permission to start going into larger equity deals. And then we can kind of flip flop back and forth depending on what the market's giving us. But I see a lot of investors that are misaligned. They're looking at an investment right now and they're like, Whitney, I want something that's going to give me double-digit cash on cash returns, has minimal or no risk, and then has an immense upside. I'm like, well, the market isn't giving us that. That's not the part of the market cycle we're in. The part of the market cycle we're in right now is investors can still be the bank and earn up to double-digit cash returns. Let's take advantage of that right now. And then things cycle.
Yeah. I'm just curious. You mentioned the word cash flow so many times in there and that you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Do you ever play the cash flow board game or have you with your kids?
Actually, I have played the adult version of the game. It's been a really long time. But we actually, with my daughter, she's 13 now, her growing up, we started her off playing Cashflow for Kids when she was like 3.5. And my whole goal was for her to learn the words asset and liability. That was it. Now, this is where you're going to get like comments in the YouTube channel or whatever. People are like, Whitney, that's so mean as a parent. And I'm like, we would go into Target and we'd look at a Barbie doll that she might want. I'd be like, is that an asset or liability? And she'd be like, it's a liability, but I kind of want it. And I'm like, okay, well, we can talk about that. She recognizes
Mhm.
that there's a better use for the money. And at the same time, we can talk about wants versus needs. And so it's been great. Now, there is an intermediate game for kids that are or parents that are listening that have teens. It's called Thrive Time. So
Oh.
Sharon Lechter partnered with Robert Kiyosaki to create the Cashflow games. And then she has another, like I said, an intermediate game called Thrive Time.
Oh, that's good to know. Because my kids right now, they're younger. They're 9 and under. So we play the cash flow for kids. They call it the rat game. But it's good because I like playing games like this because when you can gamify something as a parent, they're more likely engaged to even pay attention to start to understand the concepts, right? I can't just sit there and I tell them to go brush their teeth and they ask me 3 times what I said. To gamify something just
Yeah.
makes it for us. So I'm going to check out that.
There's
So,
any card building games like
mhm.
Catan, Seven Wonders. We've really found those to be useful too because that teaches you how to utilize resources and to utilize resources as they come up, right? Kind of like we're talking about how do people learn to pay attention to market metrics, right?
Mhm.
And it's like Catan, where you learn how to utilize resources as they come up, as opposed to like waiting until the end and deciding like, oh, well, for sure, if I'm going to build this one city, I just need to have X, Y, and Z in place. Those games force you to think about, okay, this is what I got in front of me. Like, what decision do I have to make now in order to move my city building forward?
I love this conversation, having your kids see things as resources. And at the beginning of this chat, you commented that money is a tool. And what I'm finding fascinating is that when I have the conversations on here of manifestation and money, a lot of people down the manifestation side of things see money as an energy, as a currency, as a fluid type thing. And then when you bring in the money as a tool conversation, I think they're both really important conversations to have to see, okay, yes, money is fluid like a currency. It's coming to you and in and out of your bank account, right? You can't hang on to money. That's just, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything for you. So I see it as a currency and then I see it as a tool. And how can you use it as a resource to help better your life? I love the two pieces of how they're coming together here. I would love for you to share what your biggest piece of advice would be to go out and create a life of financial independence.
Ooh, well, for one, I really think that we have a problem in the world, and it's not that there's plenty of financial education out there. I think it's a little disjointed. I think it's actually people are lacking the capacity to act on it. And what do I mean by that? Is actually there's no real roadmap that I had. Like, hey, this is how money works, right? Here's the objective of money, of building wealth. Here are the four rules that you need to master, and then here are the strategies in order to make it all happen. I think we read headlines. You're always seeking the next hot investment, right? The next easy way to outsource our time so we can get more of it back so we can go make more money. But really, let's put it back and bring it back to strategy. That is one of the reasons why I wrote the book Money for Tomorrow. I kind of systematized all those lessons and learnings over 20 years of my investing career. And actually, it started off as the blueprint to hand over to my daughter. I'm like, if unfortunately I got hit by a bus, I wanted her to be able to steward what my husband and I have built. And which meant at first she needed to understand, what does wealth mean? Okay. What are the rules of money? She needs to know how to create it, keep it, grow it, and pass it on. And then she needs to know the strategies that allow her to create, keep, grow, and pass it on because the tactics are going to change, right? Real estate is one of those tactics that has been an amazing investment for thousands of years. maybe at some point in time, housing becomes free for everybody, and now real estate's a little out of vogue. We gotta figure out something else. I don't see that happening. But anyways, long story short, what are those actual core strategies that you need to understand about investing? And so when we talk about what does somebody need to know to achieve financial independence, is follow a blueprint of somebody that has actually gotten to where you are or where you want to be. And then you can like swap out things, the tactics that they take, but follow the blueprint, understand just again the objective, the rules, and the overarching strategies on how money work, and you're going to be so much further ahead than somebody who's reading, the headlines and trying to figure out what's the next hot stock tip.
Right, because by then it's probably too late. Realistically, if you're
Right.
following the trends for the stock tips. So where can people reach out to carry on this conversation with you, to find a copy of your book, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So my book is available on Amazon.com. You can snag it there. It's also available on biggerpockets.com. As far as connecting with me, you can reach out to me at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. It's a great place for us to start the conversation on what your investing goals are. Do you need connecting with investments, or are you looking for help in building your strategy? We can just kick off the conversation there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and starting this conversation.
Absolutely, Jen.